developing that, being a detached observer of the drama that's unfolding. So in this week, what we want to do is we want to go into the details of some of the things that do happen in the drama that could potentially be triggers for us to actually lose willpower if we're not vigilant internally. And obviously, we want to share tips and tricks and also hear from you as to how to retain the willpower in the face of challenges. So actually, this is the week of resilience. And I think all of us would always appreciate having these refreshers, because we do actually act and interact in a busy world where challenges and obstacles are more or less guaranteed. And today, actually, I want to take up anxiety. So anxiety is a very destabilizing emotion. And I think at various points in time, all of us would have experienced anxiety to different degrees. I think the milder degree of anxiety is just, an increased concern and maybe worry. And the opposite end of the spectrum, where there's, like really, really strong anxiety, could even border on like fear. And there's so many different experiences of anxiety in between that spectrum. And the one thing in my observation about anxiety is that it's not purely just an emotional experience in terms of feelings. Anxiety actually is also a very physiological experience. And I think that's the reason why it's just very uncomfortable for anybody who's experiencing any level of anxiety. And looking at this whole thing of the physiological experience, it actually gives us a clue. Because just taking a few steps back and understanding the whole anxiety process, we as human beings are innately sort of built and constructed, should I say, to be able to survive in this world. And part of being able to survive is that in the face of a threat or a challenge, actually on a physiological level, our body steps up. Just in terms of the flow of certain chemicals and hormones, etc. And those flow of chemicals and hormones steps up certain systems in our body. And those systems are actually meant on a primal level, if I want to use that word, for us to actually fight back at the challenge or the obstacle, or to run away from the challenge or the obstacle. And I think it's all well and good if we sort of hunters or gatherers, or playing a role in the days of old, because we would have been able to actually use that stepping up in the body to really work against the challenge or obstacle, or to run away from the challenge or obstacle. But in the modern day context, we're faced with triggers, and the mind perceives that trigger as some potential loss, some potential threat, some level of damage. The mind perceives it that way, anticipates some level of damage, threat, or loss. And so the very same physiological experience occurs as well as mental and emotional. It's a package deal, and that's the reason why it's so uncomfortable. And we might still have to sit very, very diplomatically and politely in that meeting or at the dinner table where there's all our friends and family. So there is no margin like in the days of old to fight back or to run away. And so what happens is that the physiological amping up within the body, where the heart starts beating faster and the lungs hyperventilate and the muscles get primed for action, and so then they tense and they stiffen and all of that, and there's a rush to the head, all of that, we actually not activating it, we're not using it to fight back or to run away, and we sit with it. And that's actually the intense discomfort of anxiety. And a lot of people actually might think at that point in time that they're having an asthma attack or they're having a heart attack. And so the fear of this onset of the sudden medical type of thing creates further anxiety. So it becomes like this cycle, that we're spinning in, and it's very unpleasant. But going back to what I shared earlier, yes, the trigger is usually negative, and there is cause for concern. But what actually happens is that the mind is perceiving this trigger in an exaggerated way, usually. Well, in psychology, that's what we learn, that the perception of the trigger might not be equivalent to the intensity of the trigger. And very often, it is a perception of so there is, in the face of a trigger, there is the perception of future events, or I wouldn't say perception, but the perception of that trigger then creates an anticipation of future events where we actually engage in something called dark imaginings, where we already preempting the worst case scenario. And of the trigger that's in front of us, there might be unconsciously, we're not really wanting to do this, but it happens. There might be things like an amplification, of what's going on, or a selective filtering where we are over focusing on the very negative aspects, and we at that point in time might be blind to the other more positive aspects or opportunities that we could actually capitalize on to overcome the negative aspects. And so there's so many different thought patterns that we slip into. And unfortunately, these thought patterns that we slip into, we've repeated. And because we've repeated, it became habits. And habits pull us, they draw us. It's not a conscious practice of choosing a thought. And when it comes to willpower is about holding on to my intention, using my spiritual energy to hold on to my intention. And so habits are the big enemy, actually, of willpower. And why I'm sort of describing this whole background is that there's two levels to dealing with anxiety. One is we definitely need to settle the physical system. And you might have heard about many tips and techniques to do this, but definitely the first step is to just for a few seconds pause and take long, deep breaths. Because the long, deep breaths and just pausing gives us just space in that immediate intensity to stop the hyperventilation process and not to react too impulsively. And in the movies, we see people breathing into a brown paper bag, but obviously in an office situation or in a family type of setup, it's very unusual for us to be walking around with a brown paper bag. So that's not according to society's norms. But that's very interesting, and I hope you can see my hand. I'm actually cupping my hand in a diagonal fashion, if you can see. And so the fingers are in a diagonal fashion, and they're one on top of the other, but the thumbs are actually raised slightly, so I'm forming almost like a cup. And if you notice, you can actually put that snug over your nose and mouth. It's almost like it was built to actually fit very snugly over the nose and mouth. And just make sure that there are no spaces, no air spaces or gaps. And you can breathe in that way rather than use a brown paper bag. And what it does, and this is a bit funny, we're trapping our own stale air. So obviously we can't do it for too long. But breathing in our own carbon dioxide just for a few minutes reduces the level of hyperventilation. Because taking in too much oxygen too quickly is what creates the hyperventilation. And so breathing in the whole the carbon dioxide, a few deep breaths, not excessive, slows down that system. So that's something that we can do. Pause, take deep breaths, breathe in our own carbon dioxide for a short period of time. And then another very quick thing to do is to stop that racing mind, that's anticipating this worst case scenario and, oh my word, why is this? What's going to happen? Oh no, that type of frantic thinking. For those of us who are drivers, we have a built-in mechanism now because of repetition. When we see the stop sign, the red stop sign with the white lettering, STOP. And I think you'll notice that sometimes when you're not driving and you're a passenger, and if your driver is approaching a stop sign, you'll find that your left foot is still trying to apply brakes, even though you're not driving. And I'm sure you would have noticed that. So actually, there's a pre-programming that has already happened in the body. And it's because that red stop sign is really a symbol for us to halt. We understand as drivers that it's dangerous to go past that red stop sign. And so it's a pre-programming. So in the mind, when there's all this racing thoughts, I can actually visualize a red stop sign. So rather than just saying to myself, slow down, don't think that way, you know what, you might not be looking the right way at the situation. That might not work immediately, but if I visualize this red stop sign, the technique is called thought stopping. So it brings me to a halt. And after I actually see this red stop sign, then I can start to talk to myself and have that gentle self-dialogue, inner dialogue, to try to actually put things into the right perspective. And when it comes to the feelings, at that point when I'm anxious, I'm so locked in just the negative, So we also need a mood pick-me-up that can surpass, all the traps of the negative triggers, something that sort of penetrates to the core of my heart, and something I have so much faith in, so much trust in, and just makes me smile instantly. And it's nice to actually have a collection internally of images. It can be images which were actually real photos that were taken of very special moments or very special people who mean everything to you and who have that capacity to make you remember the truth of who you are and what life is all about. Or it can be objects, whatever it is, but something that for you is really your pick-me-up, and call that, into the screen of your mind. So after you do the thought stopping, just visualize this pick-me-up, this happy moment, happy person, whatever it is, whether it's your puppy, whether it's the moment you gave birth to your first child, whether it was the day you, received the best news of your life, or whether it's your grandmother. Different people have different personal things that are unique to them, that appeals to them. So these are the very quick things that we can do just to shift the energy and stabilize ourselves so that we can continue, with whatever it is we are engaged in. But the deep thing is to actually really reflect and go back and look at what was I thinking, and where was the distortion in the perception there? Can I actually identify the exaggeration? Can I actually identify how I was selectively filtering and just focusing on the negative? Can I pick up the pessimism? There could have been, one habit of thinking is that a pessimistic mind is constantly of the belief that I'm living under a dark cloud and it's sort of following me wherever I go, and that I'm unfortunate and that nothing ever happens in my life that's good for me. It only happens to other people, and everything that's wrong will always happen to me, and that is my bad luck in life, and I can't escape it. It's a thought pattern. So it's good to reflect. Once I stabilize physiologically, I need to check to see where is the thought running away and catch myself. And then Lebo was actually describing so beautifully the type of thoughts that she has. To stabilize the mind, to remind the self of the beauty and the goodness and the greatness of the original authentic self, the comfort and the warmth and the presence and the support of this great supreme soul. And so when I catch my mind overthinking in those negative ways, immediately then, I can rationalize, I can stop that train of thought and shift my thinking to all these elevated thoughts that we've been discussing in detail over the past 3 weeks. And the last thing I want to share is that the tendency of the mind when it comes to anxiety is we exaggerate the trigger to a point where we feel we have no control and we're really feeling so threatened and insecure, and our mind perpetuates and amplifies that experience. But the overthinking also minimizes the self, minimizes the capacity of the self. That overthinking actually can convince me that I don't have what it takes to meet this challenge, that I am done for, this is it. And before the loss actually happens to me, before the threat actually pans out, already in my mind, I'm defeated. And that's not resilience. So when I identify these things, I can prepare myself actually for the next trigger. And not that we want to welcome the next trigger, but we've got to be sensible in embracing the fact that the triggers are probably going to pop up every now and then. And so this reflective practice empowers the mind, empowers the soul, so that next time there's a trigger, if I've tried out all these tips and tools and techniques and I've engaged in the reflection previously, the next time I'm going to know, what, I do have a tendency to exaggerate. I do have a tendency to be a bit pessimistic. And so hopefully we get ourselves to a point where in the moment we're able to actually catch ourselves relapsing into any of those thought patterns, and we can just gently bring ourselves back to where we know power really lies and hold on then to that willpower. So I rushed through because I wanted to share all those details with you, but I hope it was like a fast train running. I hope you were able to catch the information that I was sharing. And now I'd like to invite you, maybe 2 or 3 people, to post questions. You can type it out in the chat, or you can unmute and ask on the basis of this topic of anxiety. And let's see if we can work through it together. Is there anything that you'd like to ask?
Yes, sister.
Yes, hello.
Yes, I'm just listening to the topic as you were talking, and it is just amazing how the mind can actually have so much control, and at the same time how beautiful the mind can be. The mind is a two-way. I observe that the mind can be negative and can be positive, depending on my willingness and my reflection. Because and I think the most important thing is the awareness, just being aware,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That can play games with us so easily. And
yeah.
Yes, without that control. And it's just mind-blowing to realize that, Thank you, sister.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It's such a wonderful summary of the whole presentation, actually. The mind can be our own best friend or our own worst enemy. And the one word that I really love that you used is the awareness. And you're absolutely right about that. Maintaining the awareness of truth prevents the mind from actually playing those games. And I even like that, how you encapsulated it. It's actually games of the mind, and it's up to us not to fall into the trap of buying into the games. Thank you so much for that. Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment? I asked for questions, but just like Seja, you can also share your reflections and make comments as well to add to the conversation. You can feel free to type out in the chat if you wish. Okay, so whilst we're waiting for you to give your input or questions, maybe I can bring Sister Usha in at this point in time for a few moments if you want to add anything about anxiety.
Maybe Sister Divina, I was just thinking that, when you spoke about the idea of thinking too much, I was just thinking it's possible that we kind of project the future. And so we kind of anticipating things, and that's why there's so much thinking. So if the practice is that, we can't.
Can you share your video, Sister Usha?
I thought I am.
Oh, I'm not sure why I'm not. Okay, right. I can see you now. Yeah.
Okay. So, I was thinking that's that overwhelming thinking, because it can't be what's happening. It's what I'm projecting.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the kind of like excess of thinking. So one of the practices is also just to be present and try, and just like how you said, when you put something over your mouth to breathe, you're just breathing in a certain amount of air, and that also just stops it. So in the same way, if I just try and practice only to think what's happening in the moment present, and tell myself, okay, I can't control the future, but let's see what I can do now. And psychologically, that can also help me not to feel like because the list otherwise goes on in a very big way. So I don't know, that could also be, thinking about how you were, explaining it. It can be a very practical tool. And not that you have to go learn anything. You just tell yourself, I can't go into the future now. I'm here now. What can I do right now?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because the uncertainty of the future is a trigger for anxiety, if I buy into it. And like you're saying, let me focus on this moment and what I can do constructively in the here and now. Because that's the only thing that's within my control, actually. Because anxiety is very much about me wanting to control the things that I have no control over. But the one thing I do have control is myself.
Yes. But you know what's also nice about control? We all want to control, but there's actually a little secret that we are controlling if we just realize how we're controlling. So, if you think about the law of cause and effect, whatever I do comes back to me. So if I choose to do whatever I want, I'll get what I want. So focusing on the moment, making it very positive or making it the way I want it, I will control my future, but it means I have to control it by paying attention to my present.
Yes. Yeah. And we've got to have so much faith in that, because it's a new way of actually mapping out our future. And it's very different to our old ways of controlling or our old habits of how we actually try to create security and ensure that certain things happen. And this new way here is really to have faith in the subtle processes and how if I focus on using that subtle process now, it will manifest in the future in the way I want. I noticed that there's some contribution here. Okay. So shall I quickly read out what our group is sharing? Helen is saying, I'm going to try to I'm going to try the image of the stop sign in my mind, and I really like that idea. Good luck, Helen. You will actually find it very, very useful. Maria is saying, thank you, BK brethren, for today sharing the willingness not to succumb to anxiety and defeating thoughts of hopelessness when facing external challenges have been covered successfully. I have been helped hugely. Oh, wonderful, Maria. Then Maseke is saying, is there a relationship between being in the present and multi-skilling? That's lovely, Maseke. And I think it's possible to actually be in the present and multi-skill. For me, and I'd like Sister Usha to also contribute to this. For me, it is being in the present is not about, well, obviously, if I'm totally focused on one activity at a time, it's much more simple and easier to be fully present. But being fully present whilst I'm multitasking, I feel is possible if I still maintain a focus on the activity and I don't get caught up in the outcome. Because attachment to the outcome creates anxiety, because then I am worried about whether it's going to work out, and I become too detailed. I become possibly obsessive in a different way, about the various details and things. And so if I use all those patterns, it's not possible to do like 2 or 3 activities simultaneously and be obsessed about the outcome or anxious about the outcome and still be fully present. So in multitasking or multi-skilling, I can be fully present because in that moment I'm doing one thing, but it's about being able to, in the next moment, shift to the next thing, and then in the next moment, shift back to the other thing. It's called cognitive flexibility. That's actually the term, which is very nice. And when I'm flexible that way and I'm shifting from one to the other, in that 1 second or that one moment, I am still fully present in the one task. And I engage, but then I'm flexible enough to then shift to the other task and to shift back. And I'm able to maintain my focus about what the aim of this task is, the aim of that task is, and the aim of the other task is, and call that into my awareness in being cognitively flexible. But like I said, that cognitive flexibility is not possible if my mind is drifting away to the end point of this and the end point of that, and what is so-and-so going to think, and will they like it? And, those are the anxious thoughts that actually sort of will be an impediment to the multitasking. So I hope that answers your question. Stosha, you want to quickly say something about being present and multitasking?
Yes,
or multi-skilling?
For myself, I feel that it's like I'm a big one on wanting to multitask, but what I've realized
I will vouch for that. Sister Usha is like an octopus with 8 hands.
But what I've learned actually is that the amount of energy that it drains from you, because especially if you have the aim of having an outcome that you desire. So I would say that if you are attempting to do this kind of thing, then always make sure you rested well. You've got all the physical skills. You can't be tired and multitask. You can't put that kind of extra pressure, because we only have a certain capacity in which we can do things. So I'd say there's not impossible, but first make sure that the prerequisites are put into place. Yeah. And then the other thing that you were saying is that if I have a nature of being insecure or being doubtful, and then I multitask, then I'm really going to create disaster. So it's very important that you've thought things through properly and it's organized well. Then we can obviously, you can cook and bake and you can answer the phone, you can do many things. But the point is that you don't really want to come from a point where your energy is already depleted. Yeah. So what I found that's very nice, and it was something that an OT actually explained to me. She said that there's when we're very active, our energy levels goes right then. And if we kind of on a dull side, the energy is down below. But we need to come to a point where actually we're in the midway. And she said that midway energy is very much connected to meditation. It says being in the center, being present. So I would say multitasking, for me, I've really felt that the more I practice being mindful and the more I practice being attentive to just being that living energy. So I'm not focusing on what I'm doing, but I'm focusing on myself. So it's like I'm having my light burning. Then whatever I need to give attention to, I go from my positioning to it. But if you get absorbed in the task and then you want to do many tasks, forget it, it won't work.
Yeah.
Another point is always be seated on your self-respect and your position, and then you can go and come to each task.
Wonderful. And our last question here is, where do irrational thoughts come from? Can sanskars contribute to irrational fears? Okay, so there's two parts to this question. I'll attempt to answer it and then we'll do our meditation. So irrational thoughts are not evidence-based. So what it actually means is that I've encountered a trigger. So the mind has, the eyes have seen something, or the ears have heard something, or just my whole system with all of my senses has witnessed or encountered something. What I've seen and what I've heard is actually evidence, right? But a lot of us are not evidence-based. We take what we've seen and we take what we've heard and we perceive it. So we give meaning to what we've seen and what we've heard, what we've encountered and what we've witnessed. And that is where the irrationality comes in, because the way we've perceived it might not be as clear and as evidence-based as the actual trigger. So we gave meaning to it, and a lot of it is on, and that's where that whole aspect of the sanskars comes in. A lot of it is actually, the sanskars did contribute actually to that irrational form of thinking, because my past experiences, colors and influences, how I perceive that trigger, my belief system, my negative encounters that I have not resolved fully, and all of those things that have actually become very deeply established within my sanskars have actually created what we call belief systems and attitudes. And the belief systems and the attitudes are actually what distorts my perception in this present moment. So it's like the past has resurfaced, maybe not as an actual memory, but the smudge of that past encounter has surfaced in the form of some belief or attitude that has now filtered. I've passed it through the filter of an attitude or belief, whatever it is I'm currently seeing. And so that's where the irrationality comes in. And on a very practical level, how I can detect that it's actually an irrational thought that's not evidence-based is my assumption actually, sort of intruded into this space. Because what I see, what I hear, what I witness is a moment in time and it's a piece of information. But I can check to see whether I actually made the full story without actually knowing the facts about the full story. So when I make up the full story of what led to that moment, then it's an assumption. Or another distortion or level of irrationality is a speculation. So this is happening right now. I'm encountering the trigger, but then I sort of preempt how it's going to roll out. And that's a speculation, about how it's actually going to roll out in the future. But in terms of my feelings internally and my thoughts, I actually believe that to be the truth. I start behaving and reacting as if my speculation has already come to pass, or in terms of assumption, I start behaving and reacting as if the assumption is confirmed. And so it's something when we think about it, taking a step back and speaking about it, we can laugh actually, because it's very irrational. But in the moment, when we're not evidence-based in our thinking and we succumb to the assumptions and speculations, we actually become quite distressed. And healing from that, like in the question, is a very deep process of really bringing those sanskars to rest. All the past impressions that have been so deeply established that are now filtering and coloring and influencing my thinking and my perception of this current point in time, there needs to be that healing so that I only leave space for the original and eternal sanskars to actually be the one that's influencing my thinking, and not those acquired sanskars because of unresolved experiences of the past. And once again, it is definitely the meditation. Wherever my energy flows, that's where it's going to go, and that is where life grows. So the more and more I connect to that original, eternal, authentic aspect of the self. Initially, it's thoughts, but at some point in time, it will be feelings. I will be able to feel my eternity, my power, my purity, my love, and those, and then of course that is amplified and expanded when I connect to the divine source. And those experiences in meditation have the capacity to, gently erase the smudges of the past. So I hope that answers your question. And in saying that, now we'll close up with meditation. So I invite you to relax into in front of me, the eyes delight in this vast, open, wide landscape. Strong mountains, keeping me on high. And further to that, the gentle ocean, the gentle but powerful ocean. And the brilliant sun. I, the soul, have the privilege of enjoying a panoramic view of this entire world drama stage at any point in time. Even if I'm not in solitude in nature on a high viewpoint. It's all about my perspective. Just as if I'm physically standing on a mountain. making a 360-degree turn, just absorbing the magnificence and the vastness of nature's glory all around me. I, the soul, in this moment, choose to step away on a different level. First, concentrating my energy on the center of the forehead, but then very gently lifting up, transporting myself above and beyond the confines of this physical dimension, opening my consciousness into the vast expanse of the pure, sweet silence home of the soul, which is far beyond the universe. And in this silent, still space, there's a reverberation of purity, peace, power. This is my home, my original home. The Supreme Father, Supreme Soul exists here, creating a space of warmth and comfort to welcome me. Whilst I'm here, suspended in light, I'm safe under the canopy of His protection. Everything is clear to me. I am eternal. There's nothing about me that can come to harm. I am complete. Everything that I am is intrinsically part of my eternal makeup. Nothing will ever be lost. Nothing will ever be reduced. In this space, this clear perspective, I understand I am everything. I have everything. I belong to the protector and provider. The world down below me can continue to change. No need to control. No desire for any outcome. In this home of light, I am in reality. the reality of eternity. I just continue to rest in this thought. In safety and in peace. Om Shanti.
So thank you everyone for the session. Thank you, Devendra, Ushabe, and Sister Nebo, and everyone else. Have a very lovely day. Thanks.
Thank you, Brother Dirisha. Have a lovely day, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you and take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.